The high desert sun of Central Oregon baked the high plateau like a skillet left too long on the burner. Late July, and the air shimmered above the sagebrush sea that stretched in every direction from the old Gwynn Ranch. I'd been there 8 days already. Long enough to stop jumping at every coyote howl, long enough to let the silence settle into my bones. My name is Rowan Hale, 31 years old, newly unemployed, newly single, and a courting. To my mother, newly in need of perspective, when my oldest friend Mara called and begged me to house visit her family's 1,400-acre cattle operation. While they all flew to Ireland for her cousin's wedding, I'd said yes before she finished the sentence. 3 weeks of no Wi-Fi, no deadlines, no ex-girlfriends, passive-aggressive texts. Just me, a rambling cedar-sided ranch house built in 1912. 6 horses, 40 head of Black Angus, and a sky so big it made me feel like a misplaced punctuation. I'd fallen into the rhythm fast. Up at dawn to feed the horses and check water troughs. Coffee on the east porch while the sun bled rose and tangerine across the Cascades. Long afternoons reading paperbacks I'd meant to finish for years. Or walking the fence line with Mara's border collie Sage, who had decided I was adequate company. Evenings cooking whatever looked good at the tiny grocery in the one-stop-light town 40 minutes. A wait night it was going to be rib-eye and grilled peaches, because why not? And then sitting on the west porch with a bourbon and that impossible, star-drenched sky, Mara had left me a 3-ring binder thicker than a phone book, instructions for the well pump, the ancient propane stove, the gate codes, the vet's number, the neighbor who'd ride over if the cattle got out. She'd mentioned her brothers were all going to the wedding. She'd mentioned her mother had insisted on the whole family making the trip. She had not mentioned her father. I was standing at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled high, forearms dusted with flour from the peach galette I was attempting, when the low growl of a diesel engine rolled up the long gravel drive. My pulse tripped. No one was supposed to be here. The hands who checked the herd twice a week weren't due until tomorrow. The neighbors had already stopped by once with a casserole and an invitation to Sunday dinner. I'd politely declined. I wiped my hands on the red and white dish towel and moved to the window over the sink. A battered silver Dodge Ram doily lifted, more scars than paint, pulled to a stop beside the barn. The driver's door opened, and the man who stepped out made the evening. Light catch and hold its breath. He was tall the way mountains are tall, inevitable, unapologetic. 6'4", maybe 6'5", with shoulders that looked like they'd been carved to carry the world and hadn't yet decided to set it down. Sun-bleached brown Stetson pushed back just enough to reveal hair gone silver at the edges. Dark otherwise, curling against a sweat-damp collar. His chambray shirt was faded almost white, sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms roped and sun-browned, a faded tattoo I couldn't quite make out. Jeans the color of a storm cloud clung to narrow hips and long legs, tucked into boots that had seen a decade of honest work. He moved like a man who knew exactly how much space he took up and had never once apologized for it. Mara's father. It had to be. She'd spoken of him only in fragments over the years. Dad's old school, or Dad doesn't really do goodbye or once. After 3 margaritas, Dad's the reason I'm terrified of disappointing people. No pictures on the mantle. No stories that lingered, just that careful distance. He paused beside the truck, one hand braced on the warm metal, and studied my dusty Subaru with the Washington plates. His head tilted, the late sun striking gold in his eyes hazel. I'd learn later. Green shot through with whiskey and then he turned toward the house, I realized. 3 things at once. 1, the front door was unlocked. I'd stopped locking it on day 3. Nothing but pronghorn and jackrabbits for 20 miles, closing parenthesis 2, I was wearing Mara's mother's ancient, kiss the cook she needs it apron, over a tank top and cutoffs, barefoot hair in a messy knot, face probably streaked with flour. 3, I had approximately 6 seconds before he walked in and found a stranger colonizing his kitchen. I didn't move, boots on the porch, boards heavy, deliberate. The screen door creaked open. A pause, as if you were listening to the house breathe. Then that voice, low and rough as Riverstone. "Hello?" It wasn't a question so much as a warning that the house now had 2 heartbeats in it. I stepped out from behind the island, wiping my hands again, even though the towel was already gray with flour. "Hi, you're Mr. Quinn." He filled the doorway like he'd been poured into it. Hat came off in one smooth motion, revealing hair thick and unruly waves now fully silver at the temples. His eyes flicked over me slow, assessing, not unfriendly, but not welcoming either, and then around the kitchen, the peeled peaches in their bowl. The dough rolled thin on the marble, the bottle of Maker's Mark open on the counter like evidence. "Depends," he said. "You the friend Mara sent to keep the coyotes from throwing parties." A surprised laugh slipped out of me. "Rohan Hale. Ah, yes." She said the place would be empty until August 10th. One brow lifted. Plans changed. He stepped fully inside, letting the screen door slap shut behind him. Up close, the lines around his eyes were deep, sun-etched, the kind you earn instead of buy. There was a faint scar through his left eyebrow, another along his jaw. He smelled like pine smoke, horse, and something warmer, leather, maybe, or just sun on skin. "I'm Calder," he said, offering a hand that engulfed mine when I took it. Calluses, warmth, a grip that could have crushed bone but didn't. "Mara's father. Sorry to startle you. Flight got canceled out of Dublin, whole family stuck another week. Figured I'd come home, get some work done without the circus." His eyes dropped to the apron, lingered on the words, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Something more dangerous? Kiss the cook, huh?" He murmured. Heat flooded my face. It was on the hook by the fridge? Uh-huh. He hung his hat on the same hook, movements easy, claiming the space without effort. "Smells good in here. A peach galette. And steak. Aye, there's plenty. If you're hungry." He studied me for a long beat, something unreadable moving behind those hazel eyes. Then he nodded once like we'd made a deal. "Starving," he said. "Been living on airline peanuts and guilt for 6 days." He moved past me toward the sink, rolling his sleeves higher as he turned on the tap. Water ran over strong wrists, washing away the road. I caught the edge of that tattoo. Coordinates, maybe? Or a date in Roman numerals. "You need a hand?" he asked without turning around. I swallowed. "I've got it. Mostly." He glanced over his shoulder, water dripping from his fingers. "Mostly is how most disasters start, Rowan." This time the smile broke through slow. Crooked and absolutely devastating. I had a sudden, blinding premonition that the next 12 days were going to ruin me in the best possible way. And the oven timer chose that moment to shriek like it knew. I stood in the kitchen of a house that wasn't mine, flour on my forearms, and the ghost of garlic in the air. When the front door opened without a knock, the sound of boots on hardwood carried that particular Western cadence that made even questions sound like statements. "Anyone here?" I forced myself to move, stepping out of the kitchen into the living room. "Hi, I'm Eli. I'm Caleb's friend. I'm house-deciding." The man in the doorway pulled off a dusty black Stetson and held it against his, just like he was still deciding whether to come all the way inside. He had to be 52, maybe 53. But the years had only sharpened him. High cheekbones, a nose that had been broken once and set straight, and eyes the color of winter river ice under dark brows. Laugh lines cut deep beside them, and deeper lines framed a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how in the last few hours. "Eli," he repeated, tasting the name. Something in the low roll of it made heat crawl up my neck. "Caleb said somebody might be here." "Didn't expect?" He stopped, gaze moving over me slow and thorough, not unkind, just measuring. "Didn't expect you?" I became painfully aware of how I looked, barefoot. Ancient Ramones t-shirt streaked with flour and tomato sauce. Dark hair sticking up from where I'd raked anxious hands through it a dozen times. Nope, definitely a he. I tried for a smile. Elias Hart from Portland. Caleb's old roommate from Oregon State. Small tilt at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. Noah Callahan. "I guess you figured that part out. This is my place, yes, obviously." "Eli," Real wordsmith. He stepped fully inside, set the hat on the entry table, and ran a hand through thick hair that was more silver than black now, flattened from the hat. Caleb said the family would be gone 3 weeks. Wedding in Cabo. That's the one. Noah exhaled through his nose. Turns out destination weddings aren't for me. Too many matching linen shirts. Thought I'd be more use here? You left your son's wedding? The words slipped out sharper than I meant. Something crossed his face. Not anger. Something rawer. My ex-wife's new husband is footing the bill and giving the toast. Figured 3 parents might be a crowd. His voice stayed level, but I heard the bruise beneath it. Besides, Luke understands. We talked before I changed the ticket. The air felt suddenly too small. I'd walked straight into a wound I had no map for. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it's fine. He waved it off, already moving past me toward the kitchen like he needed motion. Old road, long closed. Point is, I'm back early. And Caleb clearly forgot to send up a flare. That's Caleb. Noah's mouth curved, warmer now. Kid can rebuild a carburetor blindfolded. Can't text his own father to save his life. He moved with an economy that made the big house feel smaller, like the space rearranged itself around him. He stopped at the island, surveyed the chaos of half-made ravioli dough and open cookbooks. You attempting dinner? Attempting ricotta spinach ravioli from scratch? Emphasis on attempting. Now I feel like I should, Eli. The way he said my name cut the ramble clean in half. You're doing me the favor keeping an eye on things? Guess don't cook alone in my kitchen. He rolled up the sleeves of his denim shirt, revealing forearms corded and sunbrowned. Besides, you look like you lost a fight with a flour sack. Go clean up. I'll finish this. You cook? He shot me a sideways look, one brow arched. Raised for kids after their mama left? Yeah, Eli, I cook. There was a quiet challenge under it, like he was waiting for me to flinch at the single dad thing, or the rural thing, or something else I hadn't clocked yet. Maybe all of it. That would be really good, actually. I'll be 20 minutes. Take 30. I fled upstairs, shut the guest room door, and leaned against it like a teenager. My heart was sprinting. Noah Callahan was my best friend's dad, a straight rancher whose marriage had detonated a decade ago, who probably voted the opposite of everything I did and went to a church with a steeple you could see from 3 miles away. The absolute last man on earth I needed to be noticing the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders. I took the longest shower known to man, trying to scrub away flour and the entirely inappropriate heat pooling low in my stomach. When I came down in clean jeans and a soft black Henley, the kitchen smelled like brown butter, sage. And heaven Noah had changed a faded navy t-shirt, sleeves shoved high. Moving between stove and cutting board with the same calm competence he probably used to brand cattle, he didn't look up when I slid onto a bar stool. Beers in the fridge. I grabbed 2 long necks. Popped the caps on the opener, screwed under the cabinet a detail that felt intimate, like I'd learned a secret about how he lived. When I handed him his, our fingers brushed. A spark shot straight up my arm. Thanks. He took a long pull, throat working, and I forced my eyes anywhere else. So, Portland. Different planet, I know. That what brought you out here? Caleb said you were between things? I huffed a laugh. Between jobs, between apartments, between belief systems, maybe. I was in advertising. Spent 8 years convincing people they'd die without the newest iPhone or whatever. Woke up one morning, and the soul was just gone. Noah nodded slow, flipping ravioli in the pan with a flick of his wrist. Takes stones to walk away from a salary like that, or stupidity. Sometimes they look the same from a distance. He glanced over, and the directness in those pale eyes made my pulse stutter. Takes more guts to choose yourself than to stay and rot quietly. There was weight behind the words. Experience. You sound like you've walked away from something. He drained the ravioli. Steam curling around his face. Got married at 22 because that's what you did. Had kids fast. Built this ranch until my hands bled. I thought if I worked hard enough, loved loud enough, it would be enough. He plated the pasta with a care that looked almost elegant. Turns out my wife needed things I didn't know how to give. Things I was scared to even admit I felt. He set a plate in front of me, took the stool across the island. The silence stretched, thick. Who you really were, I asked quietly. Noah twirled pasta around his fork, deliberate. Let's just say I spent 45 years pretending I didn't notice men the way I was supposed to only notice women. Married a good woman I cared for deeply. Gave her children a home. Everything but the parts of me I locked in a box and buried. His voice stayed steady, but his knuckles were white on the fork. She found someone who could give her all of himself. I don't blame her anymore. Couldn't breathe right. Noah, 10 years ago she left. Took me 8 of them, and a real good therapist in Bozeman, to say the word out loud. He met my eyes, unflinching now. Bisexual. There it is. I've known since I was 14 and kissed Tommy Alvarez behind the equipment barn at the county fair. Spent the next 35 years acting like it never happened. The confession sat between us like something alive. I've told exactly 4 people, he continued. My therapist, my sister, a buddy from the army, and the guy I dated for 6 months last year, before I panicked and ended it. He gave a humorless laugh. Still haven't told my kids? Luke's getting married. Hannah's engaged. Caleb. And Grace is 17 and thinks her daddy hung the moon. I keep thinking there'll be a right time, and then I chicken out. His voice cracked on the last part, just barely. You're not a coward, I said, fierce and sudden. You carried it alone for decades in a town where that could have cost you everything. That's not cowardice. That's survival. He looked at me for a long moment. Something fragile flickering behind the ice blue. Caleb doesn't know, he said quietly. None of them do. And here I am dumping it on his friend from Portland, who's just trying to eat pasta in peace. I'm glad you told me. My voice came out rough. And for what it's worth, I get it. Different verse, same song. Came out at 19, lost half my family, kept the other half at arm's length ever since. Portland's supposed to be this big queer mecca, and I still flinch when I hold a guy's hand on the street. Exhaled. Long and slow, like he'd been holding that breath for years. We ate in silence for a minute, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm passes and you realize the house is still standing. Finally, he spoke. Softer. You're here 3 weeks? Unless you want me gone sooner? Noah shook his head. House is too quiet with everyone gone. Stay, as long as you need.
I swallowed.
And after you tell them, when there's a right time? He looked down at his plate, then back up. And for the first time all night, the smile reached his eyes fully. Then maybe he said, I stopped pretending I didn't notice the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. Heat flooded my face. He laughed, low and warm. Eat your ravioli, Eli Hart. We've got time. And for the first time in years, I believed somebody when they said that. When my oldest friend Marcus called and said his uncle's lake house in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan would be empty for a month, I heard escape. I'd just ended a 7-year relationship that had limped along on politeness in separate bedrooms, and I needed silence, trees, water. Anything that didn't remind me of the city condo that suddenly felt like a museum of my failures. Marcus handed me the keys like he was handing me a prescription. Go heal, Eli. Fish. Read. Don't text me unless you're on fire. So I drove north until the highways thinned and the pines thickened. Until the only radio station left was classic rock played by a DJ who sounded half asleep. The house sat on the lip of a small, glacier-carved lake, the color of tarnished silver. Cedar shingles, wide porch, a dock that stretched out like an invitation. I carried my duffel and 3 bags of groceries inside, expecting solitude. Instead, I found Nathan Caldwell, standing at the kitchen island. Sleeves rolled up, forearms dusted with flour, swearing softly at a stand mixer that appeared to be winning. He looked up when the screen door slapped shut behind me. 47 or 48, maybe, tall, sun-streaked brown hair going silver at the temples, shoulders that suggested he still chopped his own wood. Blue-gray eyes, the exact color of the lake at dusk. He had a dish towel thrown over one shoulder and a streak of marinara sauce on his cheek like war paint. You're not Marcus? He said. Eli Rosen, I answered, setting the groceries down. Marcus said the place would be empty. It was supposed to be. He wiped his hands on the towel. I'm Nathan. Marcus's uncle by marriage, technically ex-uncle, now that my sister's divorce is final. I needed the same thing you do, I imagine. Quiet. He glanced at the mixer, then back at me. I can be out by tomorrow. I should have let him. Instead, I heard myself say, there are 4 bedrooms, and I brought enough food for an army. Stay. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a small nod. I make a decent bolognese. If you don't mind eating at 10 p.m. because the sauce has to simmer for 4 hours, I laughed for the first time in weeks. I can wait. That was how I ended up eating pasta at a scarred oak table with a man I'd known for 90 minutes, drinking a bottle of Barolo he'd found in the cellar. Trading stories like we were afraid the silence might bite, he told me about the divorce 24 years. 2 kids in college, a marriage that had died quietly somewhere around year 15. I told him about Daniel leaving because we both deserved to want each other again, and we just don't. We didn't talk about anything heavier than that, but I felt it gathering under the surface like storm clouds over the lake. Later, washing dishes side by side. Our sleeves brushed. Once. Twice. The third time, his knuckles grazed mine in the warm, soapy water, and neither of us moved away. I felt the contact spark up my arm like static. I usually take coffee on the dock at sunrise, he said, drying a pan with unnecessary focus. If you're up, I'll be up. I wasn't sure I slept at all. At 5:47 a.m., the sky was the color of a healing bruise. I pulled a quilt around my shoulders and carried 2 mugs down the path. Nathan was already there, sitting on the end of the dock in a faded UP sweatshirt, legs dangling over the edge. He took the coffee without a word. Our fingers touched. Held a second too long, we watched the sun come up in silence. When the light finally spilled gold across the water, he spoke so quietly, I almost missed it. I'm gay. The words hung between us like dragonflies over the lake. He kept his eyes on the horizon. I've never said that out loud to another living soul. My ex-wife doesn't know. My kids definitely don't. I thought I'd take it to my grave. And then you walked in with your city haircut and your sad eyes, and suddenly, I was tired of graves. I swallowed. I came out at 23. Thought that made me brave. Turns out there are new closets every decade. He turned then, and the look on his face, relief, terror, hunger, undid me. I don't know what I'm doing. Eli. Me neither. He reached over and covered my hand with his where it rested on the weathered dockboards. His palm was warm, calloused from years of fixing whatever broke on this property. We stayed like that until the coffee went cold, and a loon called somewhere across the lake. The next days blurred. We cooked together, moved around each other in the kitchen like a dance we were learning by instinct. We hiked the ridge behind the house and found a waterfall no map bothered to name. We read on the porch swinging with a biography of Teddy Roosevelt. Me with a dog-eared copy of James Baldwin? And sometimes our knees touched and neither of us shifted away. One afternoon, I found his bookshelf. Tucked between field guides and Great Lakes history were Garth Greenwell, Andrew Holleran, Oshan Vuong, Saeed Jones' recent hardcover editions with cracked spines. I ran my fingers over them and felt something crack open in my chest. That night after dinner, he caught me looking. Research, said dryly. Turns out 47 is not too late to get an education. I laughed, then sobered. How long have you known? I married Sarah because she was kind and I was terrified, and it seemed like the only way to keep breathing. He rubbed a hand over his face. I loved her. I still do, in a way, but not the way she deserved. I stepped closer. And now I'm standing in a kitchen with a man who makes my hands shake when he smiles. And I don't want to be terrified anymore, as the air left my lungs. I closed the distance between us until I could smell cedar and dish soap on his skin. Nathan. I'm trying to go slow, he said, voice rough. Because I like you too much already, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and you deserve someone who isn't a mess. I'm a mess, I whispered. We can be messes together. He made a sound, half laugh, half groan, and then his hand was on my jaw, thumb tracing my lower lip like he was memorizing it. I leaned in. He met me halfway. The kiss was careful at first, almost chaste, then deeper, hungrier. Decades of want pouring out of him into me until my back hit the counter and his hands were in my hair and I couldn't remember my own name. We broke apart gasping. I lied, he said against my mouth. I don't think I can go slow. Good, I managed, and kissed him again. Later, much later, we lay tangled on the couch under the same quilt I'd worn that first morning on the dock. The windows were open, and the night smelled like pine and water. His head was on my chest, my fingers carting through his hair. I have to tell my kids, he said quietly, when they come up next weekend. I don't know how. I'll be here, I said. If you want, he pressed a kiss over my heart. I want. Outside, the lake lapped gently at the shore, steady and patient. Inside, two men who had spent years hiding learned, slowly, carefully, what it felt like to be seen. The light on the lake the next morning was softer, pink and gold and forgiving. We stood on the dock again, shoulders touching. Coffee steaming between us. 3 weeks had turned into something that felt like the beginning of everything. Nathan looked at me and smiled. God, the hope on his face. Stay longer, he asked. I threaded my fingers through his. Try and make me leave. And the sun rose higher, and the loons called. And for the first time in years, I believed in second chances. The house sat on a quiet bluff above the Outer Banks of North Carolina. White clapboard gone silver with salt and sun, wraparound porch facing the Atlantic. It belonged to Sarah, my oldest friend from college. No. And she'd handed me the keys the way people hand drowning men life preservers. 3 weeks, she'd said over the phone. No guests, no neighbors, within shouting distance. Just gulls and waves and whatever you need to figure your shit out, Nate. I'd laughed, but it sounded hollow even to me. I was 34, freshly unemployed after quitting a soul-killing job in Charlotte, single after a breakup that felt more like mercy than tragedy, and carrying the kind of exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. So I drove east until the road ran out of land, parked beside the dunes, and let myself in. The first morning I woke to the sound of a hammer. Steady, patient blows coming from the small workshop behind the house. I padded out in borrowed sweatpants and a t-shirt, coffee mug in hand. Found him. He was kneeling on the cedar-shingled floor, back to me, fitting a new pane into an old sash window. Tall, sun-browned, maybe mid-40s, hair the color of driftwood shot through with early gray, flannel shirt rolled to the elbows, forearms corded and dusted with sawdust. He didn't look up right away, just kept working, and I stood there longer than was polite, watching the way his hands moved. Sure, careful. Like he respected the wood. You're not Sarah, he said finally, voice low and rough from disuse. Carolina coast thick in it. No, I'm Nate. House is Edding. She said someone might come by to finish the windows. He turned then, eyes the pale gray-green of sea glass. A small scar cut through one eyebrow. He wiped his hands on a rag and stood. Luke Harrington. Sarah's my cousin. She asked me to fix what the last hurricane tried to take. He offered a hand. Calluses, warmth. Didn't know anyone would be staying here, or I'd have knocked. I liked the wake-up call, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. He smiled, small and crooked. Coffee's fresh inside if you want more. I'll try to keep the hammering down to a dull roar. He didn't, but I found I didn't mind. We fell into an odd, gentle rhythm. Luke showed up most mornings around 7, worked until the heat drove him out of the shop, then disappeared until the next day. I wrote badly at first, then better on the porch. Read novels I'd meant to read for years, walked the beach until my legs gave out. Sometimes he'd join me for coffee on his break. Conversations started careful. Weather, books, the best place on the island for shrimp. But careful has a way of loosening when two people keep showing up in the same small orbit. One evening, I found him on the lower deck patching screens, shirt off, skin gilded by the setting sun. I brought him a beer without asking. He took it, fingers brushing mine. You don't have to feed me, Nate. I like feeding people who fix things, I said. Makes me feel useful. He laughed quietly. You trying to tell me you can't swing a hammer? I can swing a hammer. I just prefer not to hit my thumb. That earned a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and changed the shape of his face. I felt it in my chest like a skipped beat. After that, the beers became a habit. Then dinner. Then long evenings on the porch, listening to the ocean argue with itself. Luke told me about growing up on Harker's Island, about building boats with his grandfather, about leaving for the Marines at 18 and coming home different, about marrying young because that's what you did, about his wife dying of cancer 8 years ago, about raising their daughter alone, about the silence that had moved into the house. Afterward, and never really left, I told him about growing up in Raleigh with parents who loved me fiercely but quietly, wished I'd chosen a safer version of myself, about art school, about compromising, until I woke up one day managing social media for a bank and hating the man in the mirror, about realizing at 34 that I had never once been in love, not truly, because I'd never let anyone close enough to find out. What might happen if they saw everything? One night the power went out in a summer storm. We lit candles, opened windows to let the rain smell in, and sat on the living room floor, sharing a bottle of bourbon. "Tell me something true," Luke said, voice soft in the flickering light. "Something you never say out loud." "I'm terrified that I'm only good at wanting things I'm not allowed to have." He was quiet so long I thought I'd ruined it. Then, I haven't touched anyone since Carolyn died. Not a hug that lasted too long. Not a handshake that lingered. 8 years. I thought that part of me was buried with her. The air between us felt suddenly too small. "Luke," I started. He shook his head. "I don't know what this is, Nate. I only know I look for you every morning. That when you laugh at something I say, it's the best part of my day. That I'm 46 years old, and I've never kissed a man, and the idea doesn't scare me nearly as much as the idea of you leaving in 2 weeks and me never finding out what your mouth feels like." I crossed the 3 feet of rug between us and kissed him. It was clumsy at first, too much bourbon. Too many years of restraint, but then his hand came up to cradle the back of my head, and it wasn't clumsy anymore. It was 8 years of loneliness meeting 34 years of careful distance and deciding. Gently to burn, we didn't sleep together that night. We kissed until our lips were swollen, till the storm passed, and the power flickered back on, until dawn edged the horizon pink. Then we fell asleep on the couch, my head on his chest. His arms locked around me like he was afraid I'd vanish. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in falling hard and fast, while pretending we had all the time in the world mornings. Coffee on the porch, his fingers tracing idle patterns on my wrist. Afternoons, working side by side, he taught me how to plane a board smooth. I read him chapters of the novel I was finally writing. Evenings cooking together barefoot in the kitchen, stealing kisses between stirring and chopping. Slow dancing to Otis Redding on an old record player Sarah had left behind. We touched constantly, his hand on the small of my back, my fingers in his hair. The way he'd pull me against him on the couch like personal space was a suggestion we'd both outgrown. But we still hadn't gone further than heated kisses and the slow exploration of hands under shirts. It wasn't to savor, yes, but also because Luke was working up the nerve for something bigger than sex. He needed to tell his daughter. Ellie was 22. Finishing college in Wilmington, coming home for the weekend before I was scheduled to leave. Luke had arranged for her to stay at the beach house so they could talk. The night before she arrived, he was quiet. We sat on the end of the pier, legs dangling above the dark water. "I keep rehearsing it," he said. "Hi, baby girl. Your dad's bisexual and in love with the man who's been living in Aunt Sarah's house." Surprise. I bumped his shoulder. Or you could lead with, "I'm happy for the first time in almost a decade." Details to follow. He laughed, but it was thin. She loved her mom so much. What if this feels like I'm replacing Carolyn? You're not replacing anyone. You're allowing yourself a life after grief. That's different. Turn to me, eyes shining in the moonlight. "I love you, Nate. God help me, I do." I didn't know I could still feel this much. Kissed him, soft and certain. "I love you too. And we'll tell her together if you want." He shook his head. "This part's mine to do. But stay close?" "Always." Ellie arrived Saturday morning in a jeep full of laundry and saltwater tangled hair. She hugged her dad hard, then turned to me with open curiosity. "You're the famous Nate," she said, grinning. "Dad says you make better shrimp and grits than he does." "I'm here to judge." I liked her immediately. We spent the day playing at normal beach walk, sandwiches, Ellie beating us both at cards. Luke's tension built like a storm you could feel in your teeth. Finally, after dinner, he asked her to walk the beach with him. I stayed behind to clean up, hands shaking as I washed the same plate 3 times. They were gone almost an hour when the screen door slammed. I looked up to find Ellie in the doorway, eyes red but smiling. Luke stood behind her, looking like he'd aged 5 years and lost 20 pounds of fear. "He said you were waiting to see if I was going to be an asshole about this," Ellie announced. "For the record, I'm not. Come here." She hugged me so hard my feet left the ground. "Dad says you make him laugh again," she whispered against my shoulder. "That's all I ever wanted for him." Luke's eyes met mine over her head, and the relief in them nearly buckled my knees. That night, after Ellie had gone to bed in the guest room, Luke found me on the porch. "She asked if you were staying," he said quietly. I told her I hadn't worked up the nerve to beg yet. I turned to him. "Ask me." "Stay," he said in a rush. "Not just the week. Stay. Move here. Write your book on this porch. Let me wake up next to you every morning for the rest of whatever time I've got left. I know it's fast and insane and you have a whole life in Charlotte. I sublet my apartment. I cut in. Quit my job. My laptop and 3 boxes of books are literally all I own right now. I was planning to figure out where to go next. I know where I want to be." He kissed me then, desperate and grateful, lifting me off my feet the way his daughter had. Only this time, I wrapped my legs around his waist and didn't let go until we were inside, door locked, moving toward his bedroom like we'd been walking that direction our whole lives. Later, much later, tangled in sheets that smelled of salt and sex and home, he traced the line of my spine. I was so scared I'd lost my only chance at this. He murmured against my shoulder. "You didn't?" I whispered back. "You found it? Or maybe it found you. Either way, I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the Atlantic kept its ancient rhythm against the shore, steady and patient, the way love turns out to be when you finally stop running from it. The ranch sat 40 miles west of Cheyenne, Wyoming, in a bowl of sagebrush and red dirt where the wind never quite stopped talking. Elijah Caldwell had owned the Barcy for 32 years, raising 3 kids and 1,000 head of cattle after his wife, Sarah, died in a rollover on black ice when their youngest, Lily, was 4. People in town still spoke of Elijah as a good man. Quiet, which was their polite way of saying they had no idea what went on behind his eyes. I was Nathan Park, 35, a recently unemployed food critic from Denver, who'd once had a byline in every glossy magazine that mattered. My best friend from college, Cole Caldwell, Elijah's oldest son, had texted me in February. "Dad needs someone to keep an eye on the place while he gets his knee replaced in Denver. 6 weeks? Maybe 8? I'll pay you what I can, and you can hide from the world." I'd just been publicly eviscerated on Twitter for calling a Michelin-starred chef's signature dish culinary cosplay. So hiding sounded perfect. I arrived in a snowstorm that turned the gravel road into a skating rink. Elijah met me at the door with a crutch under one arm and suspicion in the other. He was taller than I expected, silver threading through his dark hair, shoulders still broad under a shearling coat. His handshake was careful, like he was afraid he'd break my city bones. "Cole says you can cook," said voice low, Wyoming flat. "I can feed myself without setting anything on fire," I replied. "Low bar, but I clear it." He almost smiled. Almost. The first 2 weeks were a silent standoff. I shoveled walks, fed bottle calves, and tried not to die of loneliness. Elijah came home from rehab walking stiffly, pain etched around his eyes, determined to prove he didn't need anyone. He'd sit on the porch at dusk with a bourbon he barely touched, staring at the snowy range like it owed him an explanation. One night the power went out in a March blizzard. The generator coughed and quit. I found candles and made grilled cheese sandwiches on the gas stove while the wind screamed like it wanted inside. Elijah limped in, soaked from checking the barn. stood dripping on the mat. "You don't have to do all this," he said. "I'm here anyway," I answered. "Might as well be useful." He watched me flip sandwiches with the concentration of a man watching open-heart surgery. When I slid a plate toward him, he took it without a word and ate standing up. After the second sandwich, he said, so quietly I almost missed it, "Sarah used to make these when the kids were little. Burned the first batch every time." Something cracked open in the room. Not big, just enough for air. After that, the silence changed shape. We started eating together. I cooked. Clint insisted on it, actually moving slow but stubborn. He told me which cattle were prone to pneumonia, how to read the clouds for hail. I told him about the time I got food poisoning from a Michelin-starred restaurant in Lyon and lived in the bathroom of a hostel for 3 days. He laughed, a sound like gravel under boots. I realized I'd never heard it before. One afternoon in April, the snow was gone and the mud was apocalyptic. I was attempting cinnamon rolls, my grandmother's recipe. Peace offering to the ranch hands, and turned the kitchen into a flower bomb. Elijah walked in, took one look at the chaos, and instead of retreating, rolled up his sleeves. "You're doing it wrong," he said, hip-checking me aside. His hands were scarred and twice the size of mine, but he worked the dough with a gentleness that made my chest hurt. We baked 6 perfect pans. The hands declared it a miracle and ate them in 5 minutes flat. Elijah licked cinnamon sugar off his thumb and caught me staring. "What?" He asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just didn't expect you to be good at anything that doesn't moo." He gave me the side eye that was starting to feel like flirting. Spring slid into summer. The days grew long and gold. I learned to vaccinate calves and swear in ranch hand dialect. Elijah's limp eased. He started leaving his bedroom door open at night. I started finding reasons to linger in the kitchen after the dishes were done. The first time he kissed me was the night the irrigation ditch broke and we were out until 2 a.m. fixing it by headlamp. Soaked and shivering, we stumbled into the mudroom, peeling off wet layers. I reached to help him with a boot and he caught my wrist. "Nathan," just my name, rough and wondering. Then his mouth on mine, tasting of creek water and wand held back for decades. We didn't make it upstairs. The washing machine took our weight and never complained. Afterward, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I'm 58 years old, and I've never," he stopped, throat working. "Not with a man. Not with anyone since Sarah." I kissed the salt from the corner of his eye. "We'll go slow." We didn't, not really. Slow would have required restraint we no longer owned. Cole came home in July for Lily's graduation party. He found us in the kitchen, my hip against Elijah's, his hand low on my back like it belonged there. The air went static. Cole stared. Elijah's face went white under the tan. I felt every year of the age gap like a brand. "You're together," Cole said flat. "You're dating my college roommate. My gay college roommate, who I sent here to escape his public shaming." Elijah opened his mouth, closed it. I started Cole. Then Cole laughed. A startled bark that turned real. Jesus Christ. This is the most Wyoming thing that's ever happened. He crossed the room and hugged his father so hard, Elijah's breath whooshed out. "Dad, I'm happy if you're happy. Just God maybe warn a guy. The party went better than anyone had a right to expect." Lily took one look at me holding Elijah's hand and said, "Took you long enough, Dad," then hugged me hard enough to crack ribs. Becca, the middle child, pregnant and radiant, cried happy tears into my shoulder. Her wife Sam raised a mock toast. 2 terrible influences and excellent plot twists. Later, Lily cornered me on the porch. "He used to sit out here staring at nothing after Mom died. Like he was waiting for permission to keep breathing. You gave him a reason." "Thank you." I swallowed hard. He gave me the same. The months blurred. I stayed. My Denver apartment sat empty. My byline gathered dust. I started a Substack where in the quiet places, writing about feed store runs and pride flags in barn windows, about loving a man who'd spent half a century convinced desire itself was betrayal. Readers trickled in, then poured. A publisher emailed about a book deal. Elijah came out to the ranch hands one Tuesday over coffee. Most of them shrugged, half were related to him anyway, and one old-timer said, Long as you still know how to doctor a calf with baling twine. I don't care who you kiss. The hardware store in town put a little pride sticker in the window the next week. Progress, Wyoming style. We fought sometimes about money. It's about my city habit of leaving cabinets open, about the way grief still ambushed him on Sarah's birthday. But we talked. God, we talked, till the words ran out and only touch was left. One October evening, the aspens were pure fire against the blue. I was on the porch swing editing a chapter when his truck rumbled up. He climbed out, carrying a paper bag from the jeweler in Laramie, and something nervous in his eyes. "Hey, Critic," he called, the nickname he'd kept even though I hadn't reviewed a restaurant in a year. "Hey, Cowboy." He sat, set the swing moving, and pulled a small box from his pocket, like it weighed 100 pounds. "I'm too old to get down on one knee without a winch," he said, "so you'll have to manage standing." Inside was a band of blackened steel, with a thin line of gold running through it, like the horizon at sunrise. "I know Wyoming won't marry us yet," he said, voice rough, "but Colorado will. Or we can just do it here with the people who matter and dare the state to catch us. I don't care. I just want the world to know you're my family. If you'll have me. If you'll have this life." I was crying before he finished. "Elijah Caldwell, you idiot. Yes. Every day, yes." He slid the ring on, hand shaking, and kissed me until the swing groaned in protest. Later, tangled in bed with moonlight striping the sheets, he traced the new ring and whispered, "I was half a man for a long time. You were waiting," I said. We both were, outside. The wind moved across the sage like it was turning the page. Epilogue 18 months later, the Barcy had a new sign at the gate. A simple iron brand of two interlocked C's, one slightly smaller, leaning into the other. My office was the old tack room, windows facing the corral where Elijah broke colts with the same patience he now used on me when I tried to back a trailer and failed. Spectacularly. Cole and his fiancée came for Thanksgiving, and Cole finally admitted the cinnamon rolls were better than his mom's. Lily and her girlfriend helped me hang fairy lights in the barn for a Christmas dance that drew every queer kid within 200 miles. Becca had a baby boy who had my dark hair and Elijah's gray eyes and the lungs of a future auctioneer. My book Asterisk. Out Here Asterisk came out in hardcover and hit some list I still couldn't believe. Elijah read every review aloud in bed. Pride thick in his throat. Some nights we still sat on the porch swing, older now, creaking in all the same places. He wore his ring openly. I wore mine like armor and promised both. "Think we'll make it?" he asked once, half teasing. I leaned into him. Breathing in hay and leather and the particular smell of the man I loved. "Cowboy," I said. We already did. Under the Wyoming sky that went on forever, we kept choosing each other. Two men who'd taken the long way around to find home was a person, not a place. And every morning, when the coffee brewed and the mountains caught fire with sunrise, I chose him again.